Welcome to episode 81 of The Route, presented by Jobs in Sports. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and before we begin and get into today's guest, just a few things to cover as always. So if you haven't already, follow us on social media. The biggest platform that we kind of use for this podcast is LinkedIn, considering the demographic we have. So that's at The Route Sports. You can see in the little ticker above. That's on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. All that good stuff. So you can find us there, and then just see who the guests are and how maybe you can connect with them. And additionally, very important thing for podcasts is if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast or follow, depending on what platform you're on. There's a few here on the bottom. For YouTube, it's under the White Whale Marketing account. So White Whale MKTG. And we have the Route playlist. You can go there, see the podcast via video. If not, there's Apple, Google, Spotify, and all those good audio versions. But with that, let's get into today's guest. So I'd now like to welcome someone who's joining us from all the way in the UK, from the thrilling world of F1, Manager of B2B Partnerships at Alpine F1 Team, Guillaume Vergnas. Welcome to the route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for the warm welcome. Let's say
Yeah.
so. I live in the UK, but as you can hear with my accent, I'm a bit of a French guy. I try to work on it a bit, but not very good at it at the moment. But no,
No,
pleasure
it's
to be
very
here.
good.
How
No,
you doing,
I think
Chris?
no, I'm doing well. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Been hoping to get someone from F1 because that's obviously with the pandemic. I think the Netflix series has grown the fandom where I hear a lot more people, at least in North America and Canada, speaking about it. So it'd be very cool to hear about your route. So um, with that, I think that's kind of the perfect way to get into it. So do you mind taking us through your route? So where maybe did you attend school, and how did we get to this position here today?
Yeah, no worries. I think you get lucky this weekend that I'm not in Russia. Otherwise, it would have been a bit more complicated. But you got a beautiful race as well in Montreal.
Mhm.
Just one of the most beautiful race ever. So and
Really?
racetrack. So I think there's a very strong heritage over there. So love Canada. I would love to go get some family over there. So very very happy to join today. With regard to my career, first, it's fantastic what you're doing with promoting, the ways of getting into sport because it's not the easiest thing. There's, we all the teams are, small organizations, so it's always difficult to join these organizations, but it's also difficult to climb the ladder within these organizations as well. So first, yeah, well, I studied in France, did my studies in Paris and Bordeaux. So studied, got a master in business management
Mhm.
and economy. So spent a couple of time over there. And while I was student, I had a gap year. And when I started my studies, the aim was to work in motorsport, was to work in sport widely,
Mhm.
whether it is marketing or business. That was my target. So quite straight into business school. We started in a kind of society with some friends, which was around like motorsports. So first advice is like surround yourself with people that share the same passion as you,
Mhm.
and that share the same like business goals and objectives in life. So altogether, we started this society in 2014, I think, and it still exists today. So it's a society that promotes locally road safety, sorry, and cars and motorsports and competitive driving. So we got in touch with different, local companies and so on, and so that was the first like foot into what we call like the professional journey. Then I had a gap year. A year after or something like that. During this gap year, the aim was to do a couple of internship into the sport and motorsport. So I started to do 6 years for a company called Renault Sport Cars. So it's kind of like got a Renault Group that is producing cars all over the world, part of the alliance Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi. And Renault Sport was kind of like a sporting division of the group. So on top of like producing sports cars, we had like a couple of like sports competitions with kind of like mid-round sports cars that would compete on different tracks in Europe. So I was working in event management, just learning a few things, going to some kind of like tracks as well, doing some event management with some guests, some partners, some sponsors, and also doing some podium ceremony management and this kind of fit stuff that you learn at first as an intern. So I did 6 months over there. Then I had a little bit of a break and started to volunteer for another company that would do like event management for a couple of like sports cars events, GT3 cars. Um, all around the world actually, but I travel. I've been volunteer for them for a couple of events like endurance races in Europe, so I would travel to the races for free, um, work 12 hours a day uh, in organizing all the event, but witnessing all these like beautiful cars, Ferrari GT3, a couple of other cars, McLaren, and so on. So that was pretty cool. It's also so nice to have a better understanding on how life works in the racetracks.
Yeah.
So another advice I would give to anyone that would walk into sport is like don't hesitate to do volunteering. This way you will learn a lot. You're not paid obviously, but this way you learn a lot. You increase your network, and don't hesitate just to send a couple of emails and ask for like working for free on a couple of projects. Sports organizations are always looking for additional workforce, and that's how you build up your network. So that was the second thing I did. Then I was sort of like looking for another internship, but towards like mid of this gap year, and I know that Renault was back in Formula One,
Mhm.
and actually it's a friend of mine who knew that I was looking for an internship, that saw a kind of like Twitter post from the new guy who was working in sponsorship at Viry-Châtillon, so in Paris, where we have our engine. And the guy is a former PSG, the soccer club
Good.
in France. He was the former director of sponsorship of Paris Saint-Germain, so that's why my friend was following him on Twitter, and so he sent me a link of his tweet, and the tweet was like, "Hello, I'm just looking for an intern for 6 months in Paris, sponsorship role." And I just sent him a message on Twitter, and that's how I got my internship.
Wow.
Crucial things like when I got to the interview part. Interestingly, I crossed a couple of people that I knew before from either my volunteering or my previous internship. This would have probably helped me to get like the job as well. So everything that you do before has an impact on what's happened next. So that helps. So I spent 6 months over there, then went back to my studies, did like a kind of like project for free as well for a couple of other organizations. So with another friend who created the society with me, we worked with a company called Ligier. As of today, they do prototypes for the 24-hour of Le Mans and EMSA, for instance, in North America.
Mhm.
And we worked on a project with them on creating a GT4 car. And that's what we done with them. So as of today, there's a car. We didn't realize because we are students, but as of today, there's a GT4 car that has been created thanks to us as well. So that
Wow.
was a kind of like very interesting project. It was related to our studies. We had to work with a company, so better use your studies as well as as a gateway to your dream job and to getting increasing your network and getting more experience as well. So that's the second thing we've done. And then I was looking for a job abroad, and another internship again, because I needed to validate that for my studies to get in order to get like all the European credential. And I just sent a message to the guys at Renault F1 Team and say like, is there like, do you have any spaces at Enstone for me? Like Enstone is in the UK
Mhm.
where we have our chassis factory, and they said yes, come over. And so I did like 6 months over there, and since then I've been renewed. That I've been working for different parts of the Formula One business, let's say. I work as an account manager at first. I was like in contact with Le Coq Sportif, which is our, as you can see, our outfitter. So they do all the team kits, shoes, caps, and so on, all the merchandising as well. So we don't realize, but in F1 it's a lot of like clothes.
Yeah.
So then I work with them. Then I sort of like helped the team to get a partnership in esports as well. So
Oh.
actually, Renault was partner with Team Vitality, which is like the top French team in esports, let's say. And together we created a kind of Rocket League team as well. We've been world
Okay.
champion on Rocket League as Renault Vitality.
Mm-hmm.
Another like funny part as well, and they were like also partner of the Formula One team, so that was also something I was doing on top of helping the team to do sponsorship as well. So attract new partner for the Formula One team and make sure that we get enough money to run the team as profitable as possible. So that's what I've done, and as of today, I'm B2B partnership manager. So which more or less working more with like B2B companies that wants to become sponsors of the team and onboarding these companies over. So I'm part of a team that generates a lot of like money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite interesting. And also we generate a lot of like return on investment for our partners. So we got a family of like more or less 40 to 30 to
Wow.
40 partners. So from technical partners to very premium partners as well. So
Mhm.
it's a big family, big ecosystem of partners, and Formula One is very specific as well. So you got a lot of like technical partners and very from different industry, from IT to cryptocurrency to cybersecurity. So it's something that is quite unique as well. So this is what I'm doing today. This year we also created Alpine Esports, which
Mhm.
is a new kind of esports entity that does sim racing. So, if anyone has some questions about esports, they can ask later on. I'm sure you will be able to share my contacts.
Yeah, no, I'll have questions about esports. I actually have a meeting a little after this with someone regarding esports because that's a big area as well, right? Where that's something we like every sport should kind of be getting involved in, right? Because that's the future. But yeah, there's so many. I've been trying to write things down so I don't forget. But there's so many things I already want to touch on. Um, First off, that's an amazing route so far, right? Where just kind of hearing how you kind of manage through that, but I want to go back to the beginning and we'll work our way back. Um, and you touched on how motorsport, even F1, is difficult sport to kind of get into and even possibly grow within, right? And just the ways that you're kind of mentioning on how you're able to kind of um, get your foot in the door, right, and kind of start joining a team and making those contacts. Uh, I was curious in regards to the society that you're speaking on, right? Because a lot of the people that listen are students, right? So they're getting involved with different clubs or societies. Do I maybe want to touch on that? I know you said it's still active, but are you still involved even though it's years removed from your time at school?
It's really fun because the guy who actually told me there's this offer on Twitter
Mm-hmm.
is one of the guy of the society.
Oh.
So
Okay.
without that, I would have missed it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have seen it. I probably would never have been working in Formula One. So, or maybe not at the time. So,
Mm-hmm.
what is important, I say, is surround yourself with people that have the same kind of objective than you, or
Mm-hmm.
that understand what you want out of life, and these people will motivate yourself, and you will motivate these people alongside you, and at the end, it's a big network in the industry where you want to go. So you learn a lot as well as a society. So if you're a student, please join like your school society, start to work on project. That's how you get to have your first experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, whenever you want to get to an internship, like how do you differentiate to other students is that, well, look, I've done something in the same industry before. I've managed a couple of events. These events have done like this kind of results. We manage a budget. We've been managing people. So that's always a start. And if you do society in something you like, that becomes like your little company, for instance. And
Mhm.
that's the first project, but also you surrounded by people that are as talented as yourself and will get to places as well.
And
So that's
sorry, go
important.
ahead.
Yeah. Go for it. No, I
Oh, yeah,
finish.
I was just gonna say. So I completely agree. And I wish I knew that when I was in school, right? Because there's so much value that you see in different societies and clubs. But are you like, even though you're removed from your academic career, are you still somehow involved? Whether it's, I don't know, just connected with that same group of people. So it's still, like you're saying, people with similar objectives or mindsets and even motives. You still kind of maybe stay together. I don't know.
So the society is still like running at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that when people leave school, the newcomer in the school can join the society now.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
have a system in place where there's always in between 20 and 40 people in the society.
Mm-hmm.
So they grew the society, and now there's like more and more people joining
Mm-hmm.
it, so which is like quite satisfying. So we still follow with the guys and girls of the society. We still follow, like, what are the newcomers doing, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's a whole network then when we can advertise new jobs and an internship over there, as well as like a former member of the society, so you can facilitate jobs for new people as well. And on top of that, yes, well, I'm still in contact with the people we created the society with. So we still having like a lot of fun, and still chatting on the same kind of like forums and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's good. And there are now like all working in different companies linked to motorsport. So it's quite interesting.
Oh no, for sure. And I'm sure it's even just a network you're saying, just to maybe pick each other's brains, right? As people kind of evolve into their different careers, and maybe for you and your F1 team, you have a certain question. Maybe there's someone that you can refer to and ask, hey, how are you guys doing this? Or hey, have you received a problem like this, right? So pretty interesting. Um, and then maybe kind of building on that, you're talking about, hey, how you kind of look to see what these new incoming society members are doing, or even maybe looking back to yourself when you're trying to get to the industry. What do you find makes people stand out? Obviously, you're saying the experience and the internships, but is there maybe other things that kind of stand out? You're like, hey, this can help you break into a tough industry.
I think what's is important is understanding the job you want to go and the passion that comes with it. Obviously, you can be, you're really passionate about sport and don't understand the sport business. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to know the company you're talking to. I've done many, interviews, and hired like, a couple of people since I'm in F1.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily differentiate people that, are coming here for a job, and people that are coming here for like their career and what they've identified as like their dream jobs, or not only their dream job, but like a gateway into the sport, and they know exactly what the sport is like. They know the latest news of the sport. They understand what is the job for, what is
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of the job. They already like, you know you can feel directly the difference. And there's also another difference is between someone that's motivated 100% for the job and someone that's only like 40%. So if you really want something, just go for it. Go for it, and build yourself like some confidence, and try to be charismatic, especially if you like asking for business jobs, or marketing jobs that are asking you to be very creative, coming with
Mm-hmm.
new idea, challenge people, and this kind of thing. So if you want to go into business and
Mm-hmm.
that you're like very shy, work on it and build up your confidence. And I know it sounds like very
Yeah,
easy, like you have to do this, and
yeah, yeah.
it must be more difficult for others, but you also, like, for internships, you're also there to learn, so you don't need to know everything. But
Mm-hmm.
the way you talked and the way you share your passion and your motivation to work in a company, the more you know about the company, the better it is. So never go to an interview not knowing about the latest news of the company,
Yeah.
not knowing about the latest news of the person that is going to interview you. Just check on LinkedIn on that person, see
Mm-hmm.
what's that person experience, and look at that person posts for the last
Mm-hmm.
like 2 to 3 months. Just like it takes 10 seconds, and you have like a couple of information on what that person had achieved and so on. So, and then get to know like what the job would be around, and the more you know about this job before on, the better you have, like the more chances you have like to succeed at it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's some great advice as well. Where when I was younger, someone told me how to almost make a scouting profile of, let's say you're going to a networking event and there's, let's say, 5 speakers or 10 keynote people that going to be there that are high profile that they put in the invitation. He said he would create a profile on all of them, almost do a scouting report where he even approached someone and was like, "Hey, I know your son plays football. I think he can improve his throw if he does this a little better." And it just blew the director's mind apart. It was like, "Hey, how do you know my son plays football?" And then that made him stand out, and they went for coffee the next day, right? So even just those little things where you can go on social media or LinkedIn, like you're saying, it goes a long way. And that kind of goes into the next topic that I wanted to get into is, before we started recording the podcast, I was asking for your social medias, right? And we're touching on Twitter, and you're saying, "Oh, I don't use it too much." And myself as well, right before this podcast, I was like, "Oh man, I got to use Twitter more." And funny enough, you're saying that's how you kind of got the job, right? With Renault, obviously you had the society experience as well, but that's also another great tool, right? Where, social media and even just connecting with these people, whether it's an F1, EPL, whatever, all around the world, social media is a great way to do that. But
Yeah.
within that position, I want to speak on what does that position entail, right? You kind of mentioned how you got to those positions, but what did maybe these internships at Renault, and what would someone need to expect of, hey, this is what I was doing on a day to day?
Yeah, so the first internship I did like at Renault Sports was event management. I said I was going to
Oh yeah,
on
yeah.
different tracks, organizing logistics and things like this, linked to cars, linked to tracks. So
Mhm.
first couple of experience, and then you can meet a lot of people as well. Then the second internship, so that's when I joined Renault F1 team in
Mhm.
Paris. That was like sponsorship, so I was doing some support to the business director,
Mhm.
creating some high quality PowerPoints for them, different simulations on Photoshops on the car, so applying the logo of the prospective partner, these kind of things. And I've learned tremendously lots like during this, like doing like a couple of administrative things, but there were still like presentation that would end up on CEO's like desk, and about
Mhm.
like offers for millions euros for instance. So that's what I was doing. So I've learned a lot. Second internship was a bit more or less the same
Mhm.
in the UK, but the difference is that I was like the key contact in the team for one of our partner, the official outfitter of the team. So that's how I got to go to the races as well. Welcoming the partner and their guest as well to the
Mhm.
races, and showing up like showing to them the garage, explaining like everything that goes behind the scenes in Formula One, from all the IT, the data, all the strategy, all
Mhm.
the manufacturing that goes into it. So you learn a lot during these things. Just after I became, I still, around my career, I always did like sponsorship. So I never stopped
Mhm.
like looking for new companies joining the team as well. But just after like looking after the outfitter, I was looking more after the esport part
Mhm.
of our organization. So full time job into Renault F1 team again, still in the UK, and then looking after the partnership that we would have created with Team Vitality in esports.
Mhm.
So we will have like two main teams called Renault Vitality. One for the F1 esports series, so it's a kind of like esport, like gaming
Mhm.
part of Formula One, where all the teams have their own like esport team
Mhm.
that competes on simulators, and you have the same races, but all the cars are equal. So I was doing this, as well as our team on Rocket League. So Rocket League basically is cars playing football, but it's a big like kind of esport game.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
all over the world, and we got like successful enough to win the world title. I think it was in
Mhm.
2019 or 2020, but great success, and then we stopped the partnership, and now we created Alpine Esports that competes in the F1 Esports Series, but also on Le Mans Virtual Championship that is started this weekend as well. So different things as well, and sponsorship again for the team. A couple of like new sponsorship signed in Formula One this year, last year, and the year before. So so yeah, no, quite interesting job. A bit
sure.
challenging sometimes. It's a lot of hours of work. Sometimes very stressful, but you learn a lot, and that's how you get out of your comfort zone as well.
For sure.
And learn a lot.
No, it's very interesting, and those are kind of the two parts that you kind of mentioned a lot, right? Where the partnership and esports, and I kind of want to maybe dive into that a lot, right? Where I have people that come on the podcast, or oh yeah, I've already listened to other episodes, or I've been listening for a bit, and then maybe there's some things that maybe you can kind of share where, like I was saying before we recorded, I try getting guests all over the world, they're all different sports, and people can still take maybe little nuggets from each maybe interview. So, what are some things that you do in regards to partnerships that you think that you've learned as you've been doing it for F1 that maybe someone who's listening in, I don't know, California might not look at doing? I don't know if that makes sense. Is that clear, the question?
Well, can you precise a bit?
Yeah.
I understood like what kind of things I've learned by doing
partnerships.
So
basically that's essentially what the question is. So with your experiences of doing partnerships in F1, what have you learned? And I think by sharing these findings that you have, then it'll help someone who's in California, New York, or whatever in a different market.
Well, first I learned like tremendously loads about like the sport itself.
Okay.
F1 is a kind of sport where you imagine someone up pushing a button and starting a car and going around tracks all over the world. It's quite not working like that. Nowadays the cars are more like jet fighters.
Yeah.
And complex jet fighters. So we work with a couple of like airplane companies. Boeing, for instance, we have a wind tunnel. So it's basically like massive turbines that blow air on the 60% scale car, Formula One car, and we test more than 6,000 different components every month. So there's like 3D printers in Formula One. Most of the car is built on carbon fiber, but how do we build carbon fiber? There's more than 300 sensors that are on Formula One cars, and that send billion data points back to the factories and back to the track again within milliseconds. So there's so much into this sport that I've learned, and so that's just like when you get to enter into a sport, you will learn every day like about the sport, about the strategy, about the behind the scenes of it, which is very true for Formula One because there's so much brains that are in the team. We got like 1,200 people working for two cars a year. So, and a lot of designer engineers that are going to push the boundaries of what's possible and what's realistic, and it's always like crucial innovation that then are applied into aerospace or automotive. So that's the like I said, the core part that I've learned. The second one is to always go out of your comfort zone. I know like it's a kind of like coaching like sentence that you can see online and so on. Like, but what it means is always like if you fear something, go for it. That's how that's where you will learn things, and you will learn that it's not that scary at the end. And it happens to me every day. Like there's some things that I'm really uncomfortable with, and I think like, oh, it's gonna be tough, or I'm not gonna make it, and then you jump into it, and that's how you basically learn from it, and you learn that it's not that difficult, and so next time you're gonna do it, you're gonna be not thinking about it, less stress, and you're gonna perform even better. So it reminds me of my first call in English with a prospective customer. I was like so stressed, man. I was like, that person is a C-level executive. Like they don't have a lot of time. My English was not very good at the time, so it was quite scary. But it went okay, and now after 3 years of doing this, like it's quite easy now, and it's small things like, and there's always improvement, but you learn about like trusting yourself a bit more. Once you've done your first event, your second will be like easier as well. So It's like a video games for everyone like to watch and plays video games. A lot of people are playing video games, by the way, and me as well. But
Oh yeah, everyone. Yeah.
your first game is gonna be like, okay, not great, like, but the second game will always be better. So you just learn, and step by step you get better. So it's just acknowledging like how you can get better, and trying to look at the ones that do great things, and try to not copy them but learn from them, and apply it to yourself, because we're all different, and
Yeah.
we have our own strengths. So it's good to identify where you're good and where you need to be better as well, but use your strengths to become like even better. And that's where, if you manage to work in something you're good, well, that's not going to be work anymore. That's going to be like, a lot of fun, and you're going to learn a lot, and you're not going to count hours of work. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's great. And there's two things I want to get into there. Before we kind of get into the gaming aspect, you said something there that's pretty interesting, right? Where, what is it? It's September. A lot of maybe students that graduated last semester, they're starting to get into the job with a lot of them North American sports, hockey, football, basketball. They're all kind of getting back into their seasons. So a lot of new students are starting positions now, and those are, like I said earlier, those are the people that are listening. And you touched on your first, partnerships call, right? When you're talking to that C-level executive, and how kind of nervous you were. Do you mind, maybe for those who are a partnerships intern now, or maybe someone who's just starting a partnerships job, what kind of advice would you have when you look back to your first partnerships call? You're like, oh, I would have done this differently, or hey, I could have improved on this. What are kind of things that stick out when you think about that?
So I'd say there's one thing, like every person are different. So when you enter to a meeting, or when you go on a call with someone, try to do not like, you obviously you would have listened to other like business person, and try to connect with the person that is in front of you. Try to ask the right questions. Do not try to talk too much about your team, or about like your championship, about like, blasting too much information at them. It's like an interview, so you need to know what that person has in mind. You need to understand why they're on the call, and you need to ask questions, because if they're on the call, is that they are interested at least in your sport. So I would say, not as a lot of like business people tend to talk a lot, and try to connect with the person in front of you, ask the questions about themselves, and make them feel comfortable answering these questions. And then, depending on the answers, you can jump with like facts about the sports, and how you connect, ask them about the challenges they have, like in their company. Ask them about the plans of the companies, like if there's a future IPO in that company, for instance. Like, ask about like, so what about like a marketing experience, or what about the marketing strategy, how that can be connected to sports. What's your knowledge about hockey, about Formula One, about like soccer. Because sometimes you're gonna explain very basic things to someone that know the sport already, and you're gonna lose like 20 minutes. So this kind of thing. So get to know the business person you have in front of you. And that's, I think, the best advice. Like the rest of it, like, it's just, you're gonna find a way to adapt your speech to them.
For sure. No, and that's some great advice, right? Where, you're still just talking to another person, right? It's not always just gonna be, hey, get on the call, hey, let's do it for X amount of dollars, right? You still want to make a connection, make that, see that common ground, and then kind of build from there, right? So I think that's some great advice for, those doing their first calls, or even doing their 10th or 100th call coming up here. And before we kind of wrap it up, there's one thing I'd like to touch on, and you've touched on esports, throughout the podcast. I see the gaming chair as well, and the setup. So what kind of ways, because as you mentioned, what do you see esports and F1 going in the future, right? So what kind of things are you trying to do? How are you kind of bring partnerships into it? Maybe just touch on that, because, esports is trending upwards. I think it was the top thing trending in sports in 2020. So maybe you can kind of share some insight and tell us a little bit more about, esports and how it's going along.
Yeah, no, I think first, like the thing that was really surprising for me is that I always wanted to work in Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been like a bit of a geek as well before, where I would play StarCraft 2 with some friends,
Mm-hmm.
play League of Legends and this kind of games. I'd always like be playing more or less games, but I'm always being like a bit crap at these games. But anyway, but seeing that being also part of Formula One was
Mm-hmm.
a gateway in. So whenever you like something as well, and it's attached more or less to your job, or there's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to be part of it, like take this opportunity, brings your knowledge, your experience, what you've learned, like even as a hobby, to it, and you might get a job out of it. So that's also another part that can be interesting. Esports and F1 is a bit of an interesting one, because for F1 the link with esport is very similar compared to other sports. F1, you have a man in a machine, or woman in a machine as well,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a person in a Formula One car. So there's a person with a machine directing the machine to do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
In esports, it's a bit of the same. Like you got a computer, you got a
Ah,
controller,
yes.
you you're like driving an avatar
Mm-hmm.
into a
Mm-hmm.
game, and there's this similarity. There's also a couple of like common grounds as well. So reaction time in Formula One, you will work a lot of like on your cognitive and neural tracking, like neural reaction time as well,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to react quickly. At 300 kilometers per hour. How do you take the right path at the centimeter, like the right centimeter? It's the same
Mm-hmm.
in sports. You need to be able to react like a millisecond earlier than the other one to win, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of like of this. There's a lot of strategy as well involved in
Mm-hmm.
Formula One and involved in sports and gaming. There's a lot of I would say team play and a lot of like data management. In Formula One, you got like all this data going out of the car, and same in sport, you got like a lot of data.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And as of today, you got people like playing with like AI with software, like just to get like more data about like how they play, how they can improve their game as well. So these are the similarities. And F1, the particularity with this sport is the category that we would call sim racing today. Sim racing, simulation racing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a growing like thing with like also with the pandemic last year,
Mm-hmm.
whereas we had a lot of like events, motorsport events online, with
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the real racer like playing online, and this is something that is quite unique to motorsports, because you're actually simulating being in a car, and it's more or less the same thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
apart from the speed, the G forces, it is the same thing. You're turning the steering wheel, you're pushing pedals as well. So it's not like you can be very good at FIFA, but being in real life very crap at soccer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas like if you're good in a simulator, you already would have an advantage to compared to a normal person in a sports car, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
because it's basically the same movement, it's the same strategy, and there's a NASCAR driver. Who was saying in one of like the conferences that he trained actually on the simulator because he didn't have the budget to go and racing,
Mm-hmm.
but he would have done like 3 races in his whole life and would have been already better than some of the drivers because he
Yeah.
would have done the same strategy, done the same move, but 1,000 times before on his simulator. So
Yeah.
that is in, and one of the best driver in Formula One today, Max Verstappen, is and was playing on simulator. So there's this link as well that is super interesting, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
we try to build with partnership, with how we build. We surround like esport player with the best environment as possible.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If it comes to neuro tracking and preparation to performance, we talk a lot about nutrition, but it's the same in life as well,
Mm-hmm.
and in sports. So nutrition is key as well. Mental abilities as well are key. If you want to play in front of like 60,000 people in a stadium on Dota 2 or League of Legends, you need to be like very strong-minded and be able to focus and be in your zone to perform. So It's same in Formula One. These drivers are performing, in front of
Mhm.
350,000 people on weekend races. So we tend to surround them with the best support as possible,
Mhm.
and really similar to what we do in Formula One. So
Yeah.
that's another part of like the performance, let's say.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. Just from what you're saying there, it's just in regards to similarities and how it kind of blends in together. It almost seems like by investing or even developing, esports and F1, it's still kind of investing in F1, right? Because maybe that's the future talent, right? So as you kind of put more resources into, the esports aspect of it, maybe the next top driver in 20 years, right, was watching Alpine F1 on esports, right, or kind of coming up on it. So it does make a lot of sense. And a question that kind of came up about this while I was thinking, or as you were speaking, I mean, is in regards to, let's say you're speaking to a partner, right, regards to esports, and they're like, hey, I see this as being a trend. What's something you would recommend to a potential partner or a company just to maybe kind of get their feet wet with esports? Would it just simply be, hey, stream, or like what kind of ideas would come to mind? Because obviously a lot of companies would like to start getting involved in esports, but it's the people that have knowledge in gaming and esports are people that are much younger rather than those who are in probably C-level positions now.
Yeah, so the audience is a bit different than nowadays C-level executive in like big like Forbes 500 like
Mm-hmm.
companies. So you're targeting a different audience, and you need to be aware of that. You're targeting
Mm-hmm.
an audience that is less sensitive to advertising, so
Okay.
they won't, they unless it's genuine, they won't connect emotionally with the brand. So if you go in esport like the Gen Z audience and
Mm-hmm.
the like early millennials audience is still less sensitive than the others to sponsorship. So whereas and to advertising. So you need to connect with them in a unique way.
Mm-hmm.
I say like if you are like in esports you got like three kind of sponsors. You would have like the endemic brands, gaming chair, headset, gaming wear, a cap like you have or something like this. These are brands that can directly connect with the players, because then they will see the best gaming chair, they will see their fans, they will see their stars, be gaming on these gaming chairs because they are the best gaming chairs, or because they have like a contract. So put your product out there, connect with your audience. Anyway, you are an endemic brand, so you've been in this sport already for a long time, so you don't ask yourself the question. The second one would be like brand that directly target this audience. So the core audience that you have, the core customers that you have are like the people that watch esports. So tends to be like young audience, mainly male, and that are interested into IT
Mm-hmm.
and gaming. So why I say this is, take the example of Pringles for the crisps, or Kit Kat, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They do great. They how do you interact with this audience? You create some kind of specific things that add up to the championship,
Mm-hmm.
and then you will, how you do this, you add up things to the championship. You add up like fun things, fun part that will be appreciated by the audience. You connect in a funny way with using the codes of esports, for instance. And then you have like brands, like automotive brands, that have no, you know almost nothing to do with esports. And why would you be in esports if you are in an automotive brand? The first person that would buy a car in his life would be probably 50 years old, a
Mm-hmm.
new car at least. So where is your business going? Like why would you do that? And
Yeah.
so, and how you can like target people? Is this like just a logo on a t-shirt, or how do you
Mm-hmm.
get like the fans of a team like cheering for BMW just because they got a logo on the shirt? I don't think it really works. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all about like what you can bring to the team, like how you gonna help the team to perform. And I think like in sponsorship, that's a really really strong storytelling. So
Mm-hmm.
if you bring something to the team, that will help the team to perform. If you bring something new to the championship, that will make it better. That's really like what you need to look at when you bring your brand into that scope. because like that's how you're gonna make the difference. And so when we started with Bruno and Vitality, the aim was to say, okay, we are a non-endemic brand. We have nothing to do with esports, but we are a family brand and we talk to everyone. And how do we get the next generation of customer to like the brand, to like who we are, to like who we represented, to like our product?
Mm-hmm.
And so the aim was to create something unique. And so we use our knowledge of Formula One and how we would train Formula One drivers, how we would use data in Formula One to support a new growing team. And so we would have like the team, the esport team training in our F1 facilities, the team coming to the F1 races. And so we made the link between the two. And yes, the return investment was massive. And so we would be advised by the team as well. So yeah, so it's everything but traditional sponsorship.
Yeah, no, the esports stuff's just like esports is something you can almost have a whole podcast about, right? Because it's growing and evolving. There's so many different questions that people like, depending who you speak to, right? They don't know so much, or other people they know a ton, right? Where I spoke to someone who was at a club in university who was the president, and he spoke to me for 2 hours, and that conversation gave me so much more value than I did doing research or listening to podcasts, because he just knew every single thing, because he was a gamer, right? He grew up doing it, so it's definitely an interesting space for sure. Yeah, and I think that's about it for the podcast. There's just two short things that I ask at the end for each person, and it's in regard to looking at your career as a whole, right? Just kind of looking back on it. So if we're kind of go into the future, I like thinking about this, and you're 103 years old. You're sitting in your rocking chair just thinking about your career. What is a story that kind of stands out there, like, wow, I can't believe I was able to do that? Is there a story in time that kind of sticks out so far?
I'd say a recent one was to we signed a new sponsor without meeting the sponsor. So we signed a new sponsor just on Teams, and that's something I was like, whoa, okay, we signed like this like couple of $1 million, by talking on Teams. And I think like it's not something unique, because I guess a lot of people would have done that for the past year. So I'd said, when you can even take a step back, after 2 years being in your, in the working life, and say, whoa, like this is everything I've done like in a few years, and you can look at yourself like 2 years ago and say, wow, this is only 2 years. This is everything that I've learned. You can learn a new language, you can learn a lot of things like related to your job, but also about like basic things like work ethics, about like how do you manage your hours of work, how do you manage to work on yourself, as well as doing the core work, but can you be a better person, how can you spend less time at doing tasks, and if you also, if you're happy in your personal life, you generally are more happy in your work life. So it's about like working on all the balance of it. But yes, I'd say I'm not already 103 years old. I'm only 27 years old. But I think there will be more stories, I hope.
For sure. No, I'm sure there will. But no, that's who would have thought, like, let's say 5 years ago, before the pandemic, you'd be signing these large deals over, remote, where I know I have friends who before, they had to be in the office. And now because of the pandemic, it kind of proves now, oh, okay, people can work remotely. So it's, we're evolving and we're changing. But no, it's for sure interesting. Just even looking back to, when you started your career, or even before the pandemic, and how things have changed, and like the things you've done and grown. So that's always very interesting to look on. And the last but not least question, now we go back in time. So let's say we go talk to, 16, 18-year-old Guillaume, and, we're like, hey, what kind of advice would you wish you had at 16 or 18 that you could provide to yourself? What's something that you've learned now that you'd like to share to a younger version of yourself?
It's an interesting one. I say like work on your English, because I was rubbish back then.
I think it's really good. I think it's good. Like, you did a whole podcast. It's going to be an hour podcast. I think it's very good. Like, I understood everything.
Yeah, that's all right. It's been been living for 3 years and a half in England, so
Mhm.
my girlfriend is British as well, so it helps.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, but I need to still need to get rid of that French accent, at least a bit of it. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
but
fair.
yeah, I was really bad. I would get like -27 on some exams, so
Wow.
in
Yeah.
English.
All right, fair. Last thing I'll say in regards to that. So I'm, Canadian. We speak English, but I went to Australia to go visit my friends. Even though they speak English, there was a few times I was at a coffee shop and they would say something to me, and I was just lost and I couldn't understand. And my friends had to almost translate for me, even though it was English. So I think that always comes and goes, right? So
Yeah.
good for you for in regards to a whole other language, and even just sometimes the accents even in the same language get me sometimes. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
very
yeah.
good. But
That's
no,
why in parts of England, then they got different accent everywhere. So.
yeah, no, that's awesome. But unless there's anything else you'd like to share, just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Thank you, Chris. And hopefully, if anyone has any questions, feel free to share my details, and I would
Mhm.
happily find the time to answer and give more advice. But I think it's great what you're doing, Chris, helping everyone to find like a way to get into sports
Mhm.
and the business of sports. So that's great.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.